Hi. Hello, good morning, and welcome to Journey to SEA 2025. Yeah, I got a little palpitation just now because my headset wasn't working and I wasn't getting audio just before the live transitioned from the intro. So thank you so much for joining us. Everything is working now, I hope, and I think I'm hearing and you're hearing me. So that is awesome. All right, so welcome to Journey to SEA 2025 again. And this morning we're talking a couple of things, but I've noticed that these days, before I really get into stuff, I need to do two things. One, to remind you of who I am for those of you who are joining for the first time, my name is Shellyan Edwards Barron, and I'm a creative writing specialist. And that means that I work with writing from many different aspects, not only with the students who are creating the writing, I work with teachers who are reading and teaching it as well. And I work with writers who are creating materials to share with audiences. So that would be, an author putting a book together and so on. So I really do look at it from multiple different perspectives. When it comes to the young ones and the young writers, I focus on something called multisensory learning because I believe learning should be interactive and fun and allow students to really explore the ideas. And so for my classes, that means doing experiments, artwork, games, and so on, so that there's really so much input that they can get when it comes to understanding the reports, the narratives, and we're also working with comprehension because you realize that comprehension is the other side of writing. So, reading and writing, they kind of work hand in hand. And what happens is that when we work them together in the sense that we understand their connection, students are able to transition their knowledge from one section to the next. So, what they learn about fiction comprehension, they can apply to their narrative writing. And what they learn about report writing, they can apply to their nonfiction comprehension. And so, there is an interaction and integration. And when we look at it that way, students definitely benefit way more than when we try to teach everything only by itself. So even though I do separate into the different sections, there is that integration. And certainly when I teach my classes, there is that integration as well. So let's see. So that's the one thing. Definitely, I need to share a little bit about who I am. And of course, if you want to know more about me, you can send me a message or ask a question in SEA Peacefield Approach. You can search my name. There are a few times I feel like I need to reintroduce myself every, I should probably set that every week, when I allow new members in, and the group is growing fabulously because there's so much support in that group. um I'll reintroduce myself ever so often, but I'll get to that because I want to talk about something before we really get into all the details today. And these are the details that we're working on today. This is episode 14. So if this is your first episode, know that we have done quite a lot already. And the way the program works is that we're going to be reviewing a lot of these. But what's going to happen is that, of course, you don't want to just have one touch point. And when I say touch point, we can't just tell students things once and then they get it and then they move on. We're all good. There has to be repetition and a systematic repetition so that there's a lot of reinforcement. Move a little bit forward, come back, review, a little bit forward, come back, review. And so go back to the episode one and how we get into things, and you'll get a good sense of what we're covering. Again, as well, if this is your first episode, I do have a schedule that is available so that you can follow along and see what's going to be coming next and what we're covering. And starting in September, I'm going to be making materials available so that you could listen to the live and then you'd have worksheets to work on with your child or your students. So lots of stuff happening behind the scenes to really make sure that you have what you need to support children going in toward SEA 2025. So today, words and phrases, we're continuing with transitions. We started last week. We're going to be moving on from characters to talk about dimensions of setting with the narrative writing. And we're continuing with graphics this week by talking a little bit more about the questions and the unique nature of some of the questions for the graphics comprehension. I know graphics is generally an area that lots of students they do better in graphics. I spoke a lot about that last week. The reason is of course is because it's visual, it's not just words. And so they can interpret things a little bit more easily. However, sometimes they miss things and they lose marks in graphics. Students should not be losing any marks in graphics because of the fact that it's visual and it is pretty much multisensory. So that's something that we want to take a look at. Make sure at least the graphics students should be coming away with their full 8 marks where graphics are concerned. All right. Now, before we get into that, however, I want to pause and I'm going to time myself to try to keep this within 5 minutes because I kind of feel passionately about this. And I think based on some of the posts that I've been seeing recently, I know the anxiety is stepping in. Even now, people are thinking time is running out. And so there's a lot of anxiety. And for those of you who've been following me for some time, you know that anxiety and I, distant friends, not distant friends. I think anxiety is an unwanted friend of mine. So even like at the beginning of all of these sessions, I do feel like right now I have this really heavy weight on my chest because I'm going to be sharing some personal things. And that's not something that I really care to do, but I feel like it would help. And I think I would need to do this from time to time because we're human and, we need the reminder. So over the weekend, I saw a few posts about parents really feeling anxious in two different areas. So one had to do with the vacation programs and not being able to really do much for their children. And then there was one parent who is asking for support. They don't know what to do, how to help their child. And that kind of really weighed strongly on me. And it's been in my heart, in my mind, just really something that I need to speak about because, as parents, we don't have a manual and if we find a manual, a book that says manual, we'd read it through and realize, hey, some of this applies to my child, but some of this doesn't. And so there's no definitive guidance, do this now, do this next. We can only really just support each other and hold on to God for the ultimate guidance and trust that we are doing the best. And so I really wanted to let you guys know that while it might feel like time is running out, we can say that, okay, we have at least until the end of March next year to work on things and to support our children. And so we're talking what? So even if we don't count the rest of July, but we do have 2 weeks left in July, we're talking August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March. That's 8 months. And if you count like the week in April and the 2 weeks in July left over, that's pretty much 9 months on average, right? And we know what could happen in 9 months. Whole new life, whole new approach, whole new everything. So there is hope and while you might feel really anxious and like time is running out, 9 months is a heck of a long time to get things done. And so I just wanted to let you know that you got this. It's not, I mean, while I'm not a huge fan of that expression, you understand what I mean. Um, you can do this. You might not be able to do it alone, but there are programs like this one, the Journey to SEA 2025, where you're getting comprehension reports and narratives step by step every week. In SEA Peacefield Approach, you can ask questions at any time, especially with the math. The community is extremely responsive. The math and ELA past papers and so on, very responsive community. And those are just the two that I am personally involved in. There are other groups as well. So you're not alone. You do have the time that you can get a lot done, but there is a word of caution, right? And this is where I really wanted to get into. So I have like 2 more minutes. I promised five. Well, okay, six, right? But I think this is really important even before we get into the other things. A word of caution with how you might be feeling and, reaching out and asking for resources and so on. You do want to be careful with snatching on to lots of different things. When you try to listen to everybody, that's when, confusion could be created. And we know the saying, too many cooks spoil the broth. For those of you who are, familiar with that phrase, that saying, what it means pretty much is that you don't want to have too many people giving input and trying to influence you in different directions. That is why in SEA Peacefield, we talk a lot about being anchored and being, firm in your own personal foundation. As the parent, you have that. You are the one making the decision. You can get advice and whatnot, but you are the one making the decision. And, you might feel like you're not making the right decision. Pray about it and access what you need to access. You ask for help, etc. But just be mindful that it's up to you. You know yourself, you know your situation, you know your child, and therefore you would know what is best. So I wanted to caution that because sometimes I see, parents ask for help. And even within SEA Peacefield Approach, which, as I said, for those of you who are members of the group, you know how amazing that group is. I've noticed that sometimes when parents ask for help, instead of saying, hey, we have lots of resources here, you can look for this, you can look for that, what specifically do you need? We can support you. I see lots of comments advising, check this one, check that one, call here, call there. So I want you to be mindful of the fact that there are resources available. And so when you um, aim to support your children, you do need to sort of organize yourself and not just rely on what others tell you, because again, you are the one making the final decision. You know yourself, you know your child best. So, the first thing that I would recommend is to establish a schedule. So, you want to support your child. You know that the SEA exam consists of mathematics and English language arts. And with the English language arts, there are different sections. We have the grammar, spelling, punctuation. Then we also have the comprehension, where you have poetry, passage, and text, and the graphic. And then we have the creative writing aspect of it. And in the math, we have the different sections where we have worded problems and the mathematical equations kind of thing. So understand what is required and then create a study schedule, create a review schedule, create a homework schedule. So you have an idea of your agenda, your purpose, what it is you're aiming for. And you may also have a goal with what school you want to attend to and the kind of marks that you need to get to have the child attend the school of their desire. So create a schedule, take action that way, and so you have a systematic approach. Now my recommendation is 30 minutes at least 3 times a week, because you don't want to just spend one session on an area. So you might do like the English language arts, then you might do or grammar, spelling, different things. So work it out. Sit down and spend some time like fleshing things out. What are the areas that I need to really give much more attention to? What are the areas that I might just need to review a little bit? For example, the student might be really awesome with dealing with, let's say, solids, but they might need some more assistance with, irregular shapes. So figure out based on teacher feedback, you could see, check in with the teacher and see what areas you would need to focus on and what areas you just need to review, because even if the child is very well in an area, you don't want to neglect it. You still want to do some review there. And so do that first. Create your schedule so you know how much time you're dedicating to each thing each week. And so I recommend 3 installments. And when we go through today's session, and for those of you who have been following, you see that I always say, first session, second session, third session, these are the things to do and what you can do during the week. So once you have that clear, you've scheduled your study and review time, then figure out what resources are needed. So based on your child's efforts, do you need worksheets? Do you need practice tests? Do you need activities with explanations? Figure out some of those things. Your child may not be able to sit for the whole time just writing, which I don't advocate anyway. You might need maybe a few games, a few interactive things, different ways to visualize the activity. Decide what would be needed to really help you um, get the most out of the sessions when you schedule them. And so once you have that, so you have your schedule, you have the an idea of the resources, then find out where you can find those things. And you can easily just ask in any group, I want to work with my child on this topic. They're having trouble with um understanding how to do setting in creative writing, in narratives. How can I help them? Questions like that, you get a lot of advice and support in all the different groups that you might be a member of. And so once you get the advice, so feel free to ask, and then when you get the advice, choose, make a choice about what you want to focus on. Remember, I started the whole section this morning by saying, too many cooks spoil the broth. You really don't want to try to follow everybody. And so, if you are in a group like SEA Peace Filled, there's a ton of resources in the file section. Lots of questions have been asked and answered. You can just even search for the word help and like a million things would come up, because parents post and ask questions all the time. If you don't want to take the time to go through all the posts, ask your own question. I'm looking for this, and then people would make suggestions, and then you go through the suggestions and you make a choice. Trying to follow everything and everybody is not going to bode well. You need, I would say, 3 solid sources of information, and then stick to those and follow up with practice on your own. And so if you take everybody's advice, you will spend most of your time hunting down that advice and possibly also becoming anxious because of all that needs to be done. And then you have less time and energy to put where it really counts, working with your child. So definitely get a schedule sorted out, decide what resources are needed, get an idea of that, find out where these resources are located, and decide who you're going to be following. And then, even while you're following those, systematically ask for help. In this day and age, we have lots of different communities, very supportive communities, when it comes to moving toward SEA, because of the kind of distress the exam creates in many different situations. So get the support. Class teachers are quite often willing to help. Um, SEA Peacefield is an amazing group. There is the secondary entrance assessment parent support group, I think is what it's called. We have Writers Plus. And so there are a few groups, and like I said, keep it to like three or so because I think that's manageable. And within the three, you would get everything that you need with recommendations and different things because you also already have the classroom teacher there at your disposal as well. And don't be afraid to ask teachers questions. If the teacher is not answering you, ask the principal. These people are adults. They have already done what they need to do. You are working with your child and your children, and so you need answers. Don't let anybody tell you you can't ask a question. Definitely. You might not be asking a question in the appropriate place, and they might say, okay, ask the question over here instead, but it's your right to ask a question. Okay, so yeah, I need to stop calling time on these things, but so way more than 5 minutes. But I hope you get the point that I'm trying to make. There's a lot of information out there. You might need help sifting through all of it. So definitely get some help, but be mindful of where that help is coming from and try not to overwhelm yourself with the amount of help that you have. Should I have done this? Should I have done that? The most important thing that you can do is to recognize that it's a process. And like I said, even starting from today, if today is your first day doing anything, you have 9 months, which is a way long time to get a lot done. And so that's all I'm going to say about that today. I can't promise it wouldn't come up again, but it's something I see the anxiety, and I really want to tell you, as someone who deals with anxiety, I understand sometimes you can't help it, but there are ways to manage it. And the best way to manage it is to organize yourself as best as possible. And you can get help doing that as well. So let me just let you know some of the resources that I have available that you can access. Some are free, some are paid. Um, the first one is the interactive games. This is something new that I've started. So if you haven't yet seen it, you can check it out. It's on my website. You can just scroll down to the bottom of the page on the home page of the website, and you would see a section interactive games. You click on the game, you get the different ones. I post about it regularly on my Facebook page, Wood Coach Youth. I post about it in SEA Peacefield regularly as a reminder as well. So you can check out those two places to get a lot more information. But the games so far, we're working on spelling, report writing, narrative writing, some comprehension. Those are the areas that I want to focus on. I'll probably be adding some grammar and different things eventually, but they're all quick interactive games, take 5 minutes or less. So far, I think we should have like about 6 games up. So if you're new to that, you can go check that out. Regarding the comprehension, I have a set of worksheets, mastering comprehension worksheets. There are 8 worksheets, two fiction, two nonfiction, two poems, two graphics, comes with answers. And for those of you who are familiar with the way I do the answers, I don't just say, okay, this is what you put on the line. I give an explanation of this is why this is appropriate, and this is how a student can find the answer if they don't know how to find answers like these. So you get a really comprehensive response, and that comes with that package. You can check it out. Send me a WhatsApp message. My WhatsApp number is on the screen there. And you can find out more about that if that's something that you're interested in. If you've already gotten your copy, then please send me feedback. You can do a review on my Facebook page now so that others could know that these resources are available and whether they're helpful or not. Right? And then I also have this August, I'm doing 3 courses, one in report writing, one in narrative writing, and one in comprehension, so that your child can have that confidence going into September in aiming for SEA 2025 means that within the first term, most teachers will start doing practice tests. And so the practice tests are coming, and you don't really want to be caught out. Prepare yourself, prepare your child by getting a good review of the foundation concepts and ideas with resources so that you can continue developing throughout the term come September. All right. So that's it. Off my soapbox with resources and all those things. And I just really wanted you to know that when I say we, I mean the admin of SEA Peacefield, other teachers and tutors, and those other parents willing to support. We recognize that journey to SEA is sometimes very anxiety filled, but we want you to know that you're not alone and you can get the help that you need just by asking a question. However, be mindful that when you get the answers to the question, you're not obligated to respond to everybody. You're not obligated to take everybody's advice. You do what is best for you in your situation to help your child. And keep asking, keep trying, and that's all anybody really should expect from you. If they're expecting more, that's their business. You have your own agenda and you have your own purpose, and God is going to be guiding you through all of that. Obviously, of course, we do need to consult him above everything else. But when it comes to the humans and the resources, I said what I said. All right. So moving on to the content for today, remember we're looking at report writing, narrative writing, and the comprehension. So for report writing, we're continuing with transitions. And so let's just do a little reminder about the transitions. The number one purpose of transitions is to connect ideas. And this is something that you have to drill into students. They're not using transitions because Miss says that we need transitions, or the exam says, whoever the examiner is who set the exam and the rubric and all these things say that, hey, we need transitions. There's a reason we need transitions, and that reason is connecting ideas. So that's the number one thing you want to get your child to understand. Yes, we need transitions. Miss says you're not using it and we need to put in more. But why? Why is Miss saying that you need more transitions? It's because the ideas are not connected effectively in your report. So, what does that mean? When we connect ideas effectively, ideas are more organized. The information feels more organized to readers, and therefore readers can follow your meaning and your intent, and the writing will make a lot more sense. This is why we need transitions. It's not because the exam says you must have it. The exam says you must have it for a reason, because the examiners want to know that students are able to connect their ideas effectively. So let's look at a couple of things. What happens sometimes is that students have, so these are two examples, and it's just two sentences that begin the same way. We have very short, choppy sentences, meaning that, we have like one detail, and so there's a click, click. And that kind of writing makes the report seem a little bit lower than the level it is supposed to be. So, what transitions actually do is to create those complex sentences. And when we create the complex sentences, it makes the writing feel more sophisticated, and we level up the um, the tone of the report. And so transitions connect ideas, and when those ideas are connected, we get that formal tone in the report. And so we have these two um, groups of sentences. So just by way of an example to show you what I mean. Mrs. Lutchman took the students to the principal's office. Mrs. Lushman then called the students' parents to separate details that could be grouped because they are connected. Another one, the teacher appointed the class prefect to supervise the activity. The teacher left the classroom. Again, two ideas that could be connected. So let's see how we can connect those. So here are some options, and these are by no means the only way to connect these two sentences in each of the groups. This is just my recommendation for this activity to demonstrate how to do it and to continue the discussion on transitions. So here we have Mrs. Lutchman escorted the students to the principal's office, then contacted their parents. And so we removed the Mrs. Lutchman and we joined, and we're using then to increase the connection and flow of that first sentence. The second sentence uses, so then would be a transition word. The second sentence uses a transition phrase by at the beginning of the sentence, um, and we could also put it in the middle of the sentence. So here's what we can have. So the first option, before leaving the classroom, the teacher appointed the class prefect to supervise the activity. Using before, as in both these cases actually, what we're showing is sequence. What happened first, what happened next. And the second sentence, we could have said, the teacher appointed the class prefect to supervise the activity before leaving the classroom. So it's not always necessary to put it at the beginning like this, the transition phrase. You can have the transition phrase within the sentence. And so that's one, these are two options. You have a transition word and you have a transition phrase. You should note that the examiners are looking to see whether the child knows how to use both. So in the past, I would have advocated using transition phrases instead of words, but after really studying the content and requirements, you see that phrase, the rubric says transition words and phrases. So we need both, right? So we absolutely need both. Um, and these are examples. Now, I do want to caution you as well about using some transition words. Now, last session, when we spoke about transition words and phrases, we spoke about those that are not particularly um, appropriate for reports, right? Like suddenly and so on. But there are some that can be used in reports that don't elevate the formal tone of the writing. If this is what the students know, then definitely can be used. However, you want to be mindful that these words used in certain contexts make the report sound as if it's at a lower level than it should be at the SEA level. Now, one of those transitions is that whole sequence of firstly, secondly, and so on. Um, these transitions, while they do locate information within a sequence, what they do is that they focus a lot on the exact point. They aren't really the smooth transitions like a transition phrase would be. And so when you're using like firstly and secondly, it's almost as if you're putting things in point form in the report. And that really means like you want to put bullet points and firstly, secondly, and not necessarily in paragraph format where you can sort of make the transitions more smoothly. So here's an idea of using a transition phrase instead of using firstly. So the sentence says, firstly, Mr. Gopal divided the class into groups, then he assigned tasks to each group. As it is not a wrong sentence. So if the student has this, they're not going to be told your sentence is wrong. This is a bad transition. it functions as a transition. What I am saying is that if you compare it with the second sentence feels more formal because of the transition phrase. After dividing the class into four groups, Mr. Gopal assigned a task each group. Now, I did add in four groups in terms of the number because usually a student writing firstly would not be that specific. What you want is some more specificity in the sentence. And so you want to say how many groups and adding in that detail. And so what we have is a smoother transition, and smoother means we have more words gradually moving from one idea to another instead of that single word moving from one idea to another. So generally, I tell students use transition words within a sentence. When they're at the beginning of a sentence, they kind of feel a little choppy. If the student does that, it's okay if it's like a one off here and there. But if it's like consistently all their transitions are transition words at the beginning of sentences, then the report is not going to flow as smoothly as you would like. I usually also tell students don't use a transition word at the beginning of a sentence that is also at the beginning of a paragraph. You want something more smooth to move from paragraph to paragraph. And so I recommend starting paragraphs. If you're using a transition at the beginning of a paragraph, which you don't always have to do, but if you are using one, a transition phrase is generally a more smoother transition between paragraphs than a transition word. So, what's your agenda this week? So, this week's focus with reports is that you want to look at paragraphs 2, 3, and 4. And if you're following along from last week, you would have looked, done some reading, start making some notes, done a little practice here and there. So, in your three sessions this week, you want to focus on using transition words and phrases in each of the paragraphs. So, paragraph 2, what are some transition words and phrases that can be used? And you want to look at this within the context of the five different types of reports that the student has to work with. So you might want to look at, let's say, incidents and accidents kind of work together. So you could choose either one. You might also want to look at an event or an activity um, as well. So those two main ones. So incident and accident kind of grouped, event and activity kind of grouped, and then well we have competitions if you want to add that to the list. So you're looking at three different things. So when you look at paragraph 2 transitions, you're looking at paragraph 2 transitions within incidents and accidents. What are some that you could use and do a practice? And then you want to look at, let's say, an event. What are some that you could use? And then do some practice. And so that's what you're doing for each of the transition understanding um, in the different paragraphs. So your first 30-minute session, and I would say 30-35 minutes, because you really don't want to make it too tedious. You want to spend some time on it though. So 10-15 minutes might not be enough. You might need to do like say 15 minutes on the incident report transitions, and then 15 minutes on event transition reports. So get yourself some report topics. Get one that is an incident accident style, get one that is event or activity, and then so you're kind of putting these reports together paragraph at a time, looking at how transition words and phrases are used in each paragraph. All right, so that's your agenda this week, and this is how you're breaking it up. I would say it's 30-minute sessions. If you need a little more time, maybe 35 minutes, maximum 40. After that, take a break and then move on to something else. All right, so that's it for reports for the week. Now, let's talk about narratives. We've been looking at characters. So if this is your first session, definitely go back to previous sessions where we looked at characters, describing characters, different aspects of that. We want personality, etc., etc. So I think there are like about 3 sessions with information on characters. One of the other major concepts in narratives is setting, because characters are experiencing things, which would be the plot, in a context, in a setting. And so we need to understand setting and be able to help students really write effectively about setting. And so today is our introduction. And of course, it's going to be an introduction because it's our first look. We will talk about a few things, but know that we are going to be coming back to this more than once because, like I said at the beginning, we move forward a little bit and then come back, move forward a little bit and then come back so that we can get that reinforcement. So, what are we looking at this week for setting? We're looking at 3 things. Setting is not just about the location, it's not just about place. Most of the time, when students think about setting, they know, okay, the character is somewhere, they're at a place. But setting also needs to include time. And lots of students understand that time and place. But there's something that is often overlooked when it comes to setting, and that is mood. And when it comes to stories and storytelling, mood is a really big deal. And so, mood is actually where the descriptions would really come in and make the greatest impact if students understand this idea of mood in a story. They might have heard about mood and tone with poetry, and again, remember we spoke about transitioning skills and concepts. This is another one of them. Mood in writing, mood in storytelling. So, what's this all about? When we are writing about setting, we're talking about time, like when the story is taking place, so like what day, what time of the year, is it like beginning of the term, near Christmas time, when is this thing actually happening in terms of like dates and so on. We're also talking about like what time of day, morning, evening, that kind of thing. When it comes to the, maybe I should go back before because I'm not talking about this one. So when it comes to place, are we at school? Are we at home? What part of the building are we? Are we in the kitchen? Are we in the bedroom? And so on. What mood? What's the feeling happening at the time of the story? Are we excited? Are we afraid? Are we anxious? Are we sad? Are we distressed, frustrated? What is the mood happening at the time? And so with these 3, then we get into this. So I kind of jumped the gun just now by clicking ahead, but then we get into this with the mood and understanding all of these things. So we want to use figurative language, and that would be onomatopoeia, um, simile, metaphor, personification, hyperbole, alliteration. Those are the ones that I recommend. Those are the more manageable ones. And you want to make sure students understand those. They would have already been doing a lot of that for reading and understanding poetry. And here again is where, yes, you want to, um, you know, translate skills, transfer skills from one situation to another. The other thing is that you want to use language that appeals to the senses. And so, when you're using language that appeals to the senses, then you want to think about all the different senses. And when talking about senses, remember we're not only talking about the like sight, smell, taste, touch, and so on. We want to include movement, and we also want to make sure that um students, they choose. You're not going to be able to write about everything, right? So you want to choose. I would say 2 to 3 at any given point in time. So we have five senses plus movement, that's six. And then we often also include emotional responses. So that would be seven. And then we have physical sensations like pain and hunger and so on. That would be eight. So um you don't want to have a student thinking, I have to write about all of these things. No, we're choosing and we're making strategic decisions. So, which one do you think would add the most excitement? Which one do you think would um, help readers feel what the character is feeling now? And so, those are the kinds of statements and questions you want students to be able to answer. And so, when we're doing that, here is where I think it's an awesome place to begin. Different settings require different explanations, and we can't use the same you know um golden orb in the azure sky for every setting. So we want students to really understand that there are different settings, and so they can create their own expressions for each of the different kinds of setting. And so, what I want you to do this week to really get into the details of setting and what the different settings could mean and some ideas to really kind of expand the students' thinking where setting is concerned. In your 3 sessions this week, you're starting with listing the various types of settings. So you might get a fairly extensive list. If you can't cross five, then we need some brainstorming. And what you can do is to get a list of prompts. So I would say maybe get a list of 5 prompts. And based on what the prompts talk about, ask the student to list a few. When I say few, 3 to 5 different settings for each prompt, right? And so you're doing that day one. That should take up the time. So you have the 5 prompts, okay, and you're discussing. So you're not having the student kind of work this out on their own all the time. We want to start with that discussion and that support. So um, you have to write about a vacation with your family. Where could you be? You could be in a hotel, you could be in another country, you could be by the beach, a beach house, you could be on a cruise ship, you could be, let me see, where else? Vacation, vacation, vacation. You can have a staycation in your own home and you decide, to go exploring on different days. And then this particular day you went to the park or you went to like one of the kind of largely unknown kind of, I would say, creepy cool places to generate ideas for like destinations and so on is this place called Nolly's Tunnel. I'm gonna put it up. Write a comment. I mean, it's not huge and it doesn't have a lot of fanfare in this country. It's one of those places where you could go visit. It's like an old train line kind of thing. Um, but here's the thing about this. From on one side, when you're there, you could see to the other end, but then it's a tunnel, right? And so I don't know about you, but that could like seriously activate my imagination. Just being in that physical space doesn't cost anything other than, gas and maybe snacks for the journey, depending on where you're coming from. So search it up and go take a look with the kids. And you know what it's we're on an adventure, and then you decide to drive through the tunnel, and then the tunnel takes you to another dimension, or something comes out of the tunnel. I mean, imagination. But you get to see, and so there's the tunnel. um there's the I guess the over bit. There's the I think, if I remember correctly, there's a picnic area. um there's a lot of bats. Be mindful of that. Lots of roaches. Yeah, be mindful of that. So if you're going to drive through the tunnel, which you can, windows up, everywhere sealed, right? But the thing is that it's a place to explore, that you can actually physically go to explore. And so, vacation. I mean, you're doing stuff on your vacation, and lots of ideas could come out of that. So, sit with your child, make a list. So we're going on a vacation. These are the things that we could do. Or you had a situation with your best friend. Where could you have this situation? At their house, in their backyard, in the house, at your house, backyard, front yard, bedroom, kitchen, living room. You could have that situation at school. So you want to brainstorm. So get the 5 prompts, brainstorm as many as you could think of. And I would say maybe you could tap out at 10, right? Might have a few more, but tap out for each one of the prompts at 10. And so then you should have a list of 50 locations. When you review that list, you might realize that some of them overlap. So you might be, you could have the situation with your friend at school, or you could have them at home, and lots of, so you could see overlap where there is overlap. So once there is overlap, whittle it down to the unique locations that you've been able to list. And then from that, you want to explore a few locations. So when I say explore, you want to really get into, like, what do you see here? What do you smell, taste, touch? What could be happening in the environment, those kinds of things. And so that's what you want to do with the exploring the setting, because it's not like automatic that students would just know, hey, well, at the beach, you're supposed to know this is what. They might not remember. And so explore it. Go through all the different senses for the different sections, and give them some feedback on that. And so what I do with my students, and for those who would be doing the narrative course that I'm doing in August, what I would do with my students when we go through this, because this is something I do with my students, I give them feedback and we brainstorm about expressions and words and phrases that they can use in writing about these places. And we do an experiment to help them remember that, hey, setting is a lot more than just one thing. We have to be very expressive with setting. And so we do worksheets and different things, and I give them feedback, and then we do some writing, and I give them feedback on that. I show them how to add descriptions into sentences, and we go through a lot of details. Working at home, you want to start with getting the ideas that you could express in these different areas. And so this is what you really want to be working on with the narrative writing this week. Right? And so that's it for narratives this week. And so you know what you have to do for reports and narratives so far if you're following along with the program. And then we have graphics for comprehension. So we're moving on to understanding graphics questions. Last week, we looked at different types of graphics. There's a long list. We looked at some of the things that graphics have in common, what the main purpose could be, and so on. So if you missed that episode, go back. It's at the end of the session because I always do reports, narratives, and then comprehension. So it's at the end of this session, so you could just go directly to the ending. Um, so we have that. This week, what we're looking at would be questions that are unique to graphics so that students can prepare effectively for answering these questions, right? So let's see. Reminder, graphics are visual. And you'd hear me saying this over and over when I talk about graphics because it's a very important consideration. Even when words are used, we have to think about the visual impact of the words or text, as it's called, in a graphic situation. So we really always have to remind ourselves and our students that graphics are visual. So whatever questions are being asked, the information is going to start with something visual. And that's a very important thing to always remember. All right, so then let's see. What are the different questions? So these are some. There are others. I think in the comprehension worksheets that I have available, I made a list. So for each section, I did a list of unique questions or typical questions that would come for fiction, typical questions that would come for nonfiction, poetry, and graphics. So if you have a copy of that, you can go to that page. It's just at the beginning of the section on the graphics. And so you'd have a list of questions that you would anticipate where graphics are concerned. And so these are the main ones, I think, but there are others that you might want to look at. And so questions about the images, and there are different questions that you would get about the images. Um, Questions about the visual elements, and that would be like the text and the so visual elements of text, so like the size and shape and location and type of print and all those things. What's missing? Remember, the graphic has a purpose. So you could also get a question about what would you add to fulfill the purpose? Is something missing that would cause the graphic not to really fulfill its purpose? And so we can add that as well. And then questions about audience. Who do you think this would appeal to? So if you really want to get into the details of graphics and the different types of questions for graphics, definitely I would recommend enrolling in the August program on comprehension, where I go into all the details. If you want an intro to that, then the 8 worksheets has some information on that. And you can also make sure you get a hold of the past papers so that you could see what is in the past papers on those questions. And if you want a copy of the past papers grouped along with the answers, then you could message me for a copy of that as well. Message me on Facebook. On If you're looking at it on YouTube, you could put a comment on YouTube, and I'll contact you. But of course, WhatsApp is the most direct way to get in contact with me, 717-4993. For those of you who are wondering, if you can't see the bottom of the slide that I'm sharing, my number is there. It's 717-4993. So you can message me if you want to find out about what else is available. But that's what I would recommend. So, um, unique questions to graphics. And so you really want to pay attention to those. And so, at the very least, you want to get a copy of the past papers so that you could review how the questions are phrased, what is required to answer the questions, and you might want to get your hands on some sample responses so that you could see what a good answer looks like, right? So these are the things that you're working on this week when we're talking about graphics comprehension. And so we're studying graphics questions this week. And so another activity that I give my students, I have them create their own questions so that they can understand that idea behind what is being asked of them. So I give them a passage. In this case, I would give them a graphic, and they have to create questions on the graphic and answer the questions. And so we go through that. So I guide them on, okay, this is how the question is normally phrased, and this is how you would answer it. And so they test that out themselves, and we go through that. And that's what we'd be doing in August when we cover comprehension. And so, just in case you're wondering, if you enroll in that August session, you will be getting a copy of the 8 worksheets in addition to other worksheets that are available for students in my class as well. So we're looking at the graphics questions. If none of these things are available to you, at the very least, get a copy of the past papers. Past papers are available on my website. They're available on the Ministry of Education's website under primary school resources as well. But you can, um, I'm going to put the, where is it? I'll put it in the comments. This is the link to get the past papers from my website. Um, I have from 2019 to 2024. So on the ministry's website, I think there's a specimen paper, but you get 2020, 21, 22, and 23. So you have 4 of them available on the Ministry of Education's website, the whole thing with like candidate number to put in that whole the whole works. On my website is the exam itself, copies that I would have gotten over the years. So, those that were in circulation, those kinds of things, so that you would be able to get the 2019 and the 2024, that's available there. But the last 4, if you only could access what's on the ministry's website, 4, I think that's a good thing to start with. But you're looking at the questions, how they are phrased, requirements to answer the questions, and how questions are answered. You want examples. And of course, for the examples, you need to get the ELA package that I have, which has the answers for the whole ELA from, well, that's the um, tasks 1 to 6, not the creative writing, just the comprehension and the grammar, spelling, punctuation. Yeah. So from 2019 to 2024, you get answers with explanations, as I said, where to look for answers, what kind of question, how exactly to answer a question, why a question works, and why it would work better than other types of responses. And so that is it for comprehension. So now you know what you have to do for comprehension. And so this week we covered quite a lot. Words and phrases for transitions in reports, dimensions of setting for narratives, and a few of the unique questions for the graphics in the comprehension section. So that is it for our session this week. I'm really trying to keep it into 1 hour, but of course, sometimes when I have stuff to say, I figure, you know what, let me say it instead of shortcutting it and people don't understand. So that is it for us. So, of course, if you have any questions about anything spoken about today, anything in any of the documents that you've received, certainly please reach out. You have my WhatsApp number. It's 717-4993. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me in SEA Peacefield Approach. You could create a post and tag me. If you're watching on YouTube, make a comment and I'll reach out and, WhatsApp, you can WhatsApp me as well. And so, like I said at the beginning, there's a ton of resources. You want to make sure you have a process that you're going to be going through and not just, here, there, and everywhere, trying not to confuse or overwhelm yourself. And so, feel free to ask the questions, but make a choice about where you want to get your information from and how it's going to support you. And then, of course, well, you'd have the practice and the worksheets and so on. And when you're practicing, if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out, let me know. SEA Peaceful Approach, you could do a screenshot of whatever the problem is you're having and ask, hey, I need some help with this. Extremely responsive community is not just myself or the other admin or even the moderators. Lots of parents and other teachers respond as well. And so you have your agenda this week, and hopefully through systematic approach you would be able to get what you need to get done this week. But don't worry about it, give yourself some grace. We've got 9 months. Yes, the time is ticking away, but we have time, and so approach it systematically, and that will be the best way to get the most out of the time left. Okay, so thank you for those of you who are able to take in the live. I appreciate you immensely. Please feel free to go to the Facebook page, Word Coach Youth, and give a review. You can give a review on YouTube as well. The thumbs up usually helps a lot in terms of people seeing that, okay, viewers are gaining from the sessions, because these sessions are made available because I know how distressing SEA is, and I wanted to do as much as I can to make it as stress free as possible. So, have a wonderful one. It's raining heavily by me now. No more blue skies. I hope the weather treats you well. And have a wonderful rest of the day today. Next week, we're continuing with more on setting. We'd be moving on from transitions, but join us and you'll get a lot more information. All right. So, thank you very much, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the day today, and hopefully, I'll see you next week. Bye bye.